We're live from the WayMaker Men's Summit, part of the BET experience, here in the iHeartRadio Blueprint Connect podcast room, proudly sponsored by the American Cancer Society. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a superhero executive. You have executives, but then you have superhero executives. And I say that affectionately because you run one of the last of the Mohicans as far as Black-owned, RAND-led companies. And I know Black-owned gets tricky, but definitely Black-owned in spirit and led. And so, I admire you, brother, because holding on to these legacy brands is almost impossible in this current world. And I know you're feeling that. How important is it to be a steward of a mothership like BET?
Well, for me, that's exactly what drives me. It is, I tell people all the time, the entertainment side of BET is really, really fun, and it's wonderful, and get to, spend time and develop relationships with people like you and other amazing talents. But the thing that gets me out of bed every morning is the role that BET plays for the community.
Yes.
And the service that BET provides to the community. And when I was a kid, there were multiple big Black brands. There was Ebony, there was Essence, there was this, there was that. And, now there's one.
Yes.
And, from a competitive perspective, that's nice. But from the perspective of the community, it puts extraordinary importance on BET being able to step up and be present for the community, because if BET doesn't step up, there's nothing behind it.
That's right. And you don't like compliments all the time. You try to tell me this educational background makes you this way, or you have this advantage because you do this, but you literally are the new model for superhero. And I say this, and I'm, I don't work with you, so you don't pay me.
Right, I don't pay you.
Right.
That's right.
So I'm not saying this because I'm getting paid.
Right, no, that's true. But
I'm saying this because legitimately I think the things we grew up thinking were status quo, we've all learned can be very harmful if not controlled with some type of education or understanding. You are, again, to your own words, the last of a dying breed with BET. How do we keep, culture first in this new world of, I wanted to curse a little bit, but mess. Let's just say mess.
Right. Well, it's a great question, and it's funny. I was debating. I've been at BET so long. I've some of the people. I was there when the founder was there. That's how long I was there.
Which is a blessing.
Right. It is an extraordinary.
So you understand
blessing.
the ethos.
It's exactly right. And but one of the things that it's true about for BET to be BET, we have to always keep track of where the culture is and where the culture is going. And one of the things that's interesting today is about where the culture is and where the culture is going. And as you know, we've got this big 106 & Park tribute happening at the BET Awards in a couple of days. And one of the architect of 106 & Park is a dear friend of both of ours.
Yes.
And I was talking to him about how the world has evolved since then. And one of the things I said to him is, if you think about it, when 106 Park existed, the culture was anchored in music. Today, there's actually things that play a bigger role in culture than music. And I said, as an example.
Which is crazy, by the way.
It is crazy.
Considering that's been a soundtrack to our existence.
That's right. But if you think about today, the outsized role that sports and athletes play in our culture relative to when 106 & Park existed, right? And you can actually, there are all these, I'm a dork, so I'll do metrics, so I'll stop doing that.
Yeah.
But the point is, part of what we have to do is constantly try to be mindful of where the culture is, how do we engage it, how do we support it, and how do we ultimately ensure that we're an integral part of that.
Yes, I think it's the platform, right? What you knew to be BET all these years is not the same.
That's right.
So you do these partnerships with these amazing storytellers.
Right.
Now, there are a couple of needs that we have to check off the list. We need consciousness just in our presentation as a culture, musically, the way we show up for interviews and jobs, the way our work ethic, comes
Yes.
forth because there's not a lot of physical work ethic, I think, anymore. They think these buttons are going to suffice. Can you talk about the sustainable nature of this new business world when it comes to that?
Well, the world is definitely changing, and in particular, I think young folks need to understand the way the world is changing around them. Post-COVID, employees had all the power in corporate America. What you're seeing is that dynamic has completely shifted, and now corporations have recaptured all that power. And for our community, making sure that we understand how that dynamic has changed and that we're being very responsive to it, right? So it's no longer that corporations have to adapt to you. It's no longer that corporations have to celebrate you bringing your full self to work. It's no longer that a corporation has to figure out how to create an environment that's reflective of your values, right? Now it's about you figuring out how do you flourish in someone else's environment. And if we're slow as a community to adapt to that we're going to be left behind in a really epic way. And so it's critically important that our community really embrace not to say celebrate, but embrace such that we can adapt and respond.
Listen, man, this needs to be like a 2-hour television show, but we're short on time. And I want to just first tell you, because you're from the ethos, the center of what BET, the foundation it stands on. I just want you to know you have a real supporter in me, and
thank you.
It's paramount, no pun intended.
Right. Well done.
That you fix this, Scott. You're a thoughtful human. There's not a lot of fluff and glitz and glamour, with your ideologies or thinking. And we need that type of leadership. But I want you to speak specifically, and I have two things. This is the first one. Speak specifically to that young mind that thinks that they have to be a certain way to exist. You did not have that as your blueprint.
That's right.
And I think you have a real testimony about that.
That's right. I think one of the most important things for our community is to think really boldly. One of the things that strikes me at this stage of my life, I was just on stage with a dear friend and colleague who's a similar age. He was extraordinarily successful, is an extraordinarily successful corporate executive. But what strikes me is that he and I sit on the board of our alma mater,
right?
One of the best, the single best business school in the world, and he and I are, the world would say we've done very well professionally, but there are other people on the board who are multi-billionaires, right? And my point is, same education, right? And people will say different opportunities because of race and what have you. Part of it, certainly. Yeah. But also part of it is the mindset of he and I were coming out aspiring to get to where we were. We didn't know that there was something so much broader, so much grander, right?
Yeah.
And so part of what we have to do for our young folks is really have them appreciate how important it is to think really, really, really big. Take risk, be bold. And that's one thing that I really want to encourage people, because I do think the difference between outcomes for so many people is how much risk you are willing to take. In our community, we're not encouraged to take risks, right? We're
be safe.
That's right, be safe, right?
Go do this and you'll get this.
Right. Our friend Tyler Perry tells the story about his mom telling him, like, stop this theater thing, go and work for UPS, right? And there's nothing wrong with working for UPS, but could you imagine if Tyler took that advice? The difference in outcome.
Yeah.
So I do
one of your biggest partners.
Yes, an extraordinary partner. And so I think that is a core message that I have for young people, is first and foremost. And then the second message is that there's an impression that somehow any of this is easy, and it's not easy. There's something about, I think one of the things that we have such grace and we have such panache in our community that actually makes it look easy, right? And
that's a fact, though, Scott.
Right.
They don't understand the work the abuse.
Right. That's right. That's
the
right.
things.
What it took to get here, all the shots that you had to take,
Right.
all the blows that you had to endure, and the hard work. And so there's no substitute for hard work. It doesn't matter how smart you are.
Right.
It doesn't matter what kind of relationship you have. There's just no substitute for hard work. So it's so critically important, in particular for young people, to really kind of step up and embrace the fact that they have to do hard work to
Yes.
really get great results.
Yeah, and there's no way around it.
None.
Because one way or the other, that hard work is going to force your hand.
That's exactly right.
You're a waymaker for many. You lead thousands of people that work and make BET what it is. To an inspiring entrepreneur that doesn't know that the waymakers in your life have everything to do with your success and where you are, can you share who some of those waymakers are?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't know any extraordinarily successful person who doesn't have an array of people who engaged and supported with them early on in their career and throughout. And two that I love to cite. First and foremost, Ken Chenault, the former CEO of American Express, just
Phenomenal guy.
the most generous, thoughtful, engaged person. Took me under his wing when I was a young executive and gave me great counsel. And really, it's a function of the fact that this journey is a journey. And like any other path, if somebody has walked the path before you, right, they can tell you, this step, this
Watch out for
right,
that.
exactly right. And what's so beautiful about Ken, and he didn't just do it for me, he's done it for a community of people, is that he really was very deliberate about sharing his knowledge and insights and counsel with people. So I'm immensely grateful for that. And another person is Dick Parsons, who recently passed. But Dick very similarly,
Rest in peace.
navigated the most extraordinarily complex terrains and was very generous about coming back and saying, okay, now that I've figured this out, I'm happy to give you my insights and my advice. And as a person who is the beneficiary of that, my view is it's our responsibility to do it for the next generation.
Yes.
Right? And we have to pass this on because it's such a powerful, powerful asset in anybody's career, toolbox.
Yes.
Because there's so much that we're going to encounter as a young person, so much that a young person encounters that they've never seen before, that they don't know how to navigate. And so getting access to that information is extraordinarily helpful.
Yeah, and don't take it for granted either.
Right.
I think
That's
a lot
right.
of times, we had a lot of people sit in that chair you're in and talk about their mentees and their parents and their grandmother and all these things. And, a lot of these people aren't here anymore.
Right.
And you have to let them know by showing them that their words meant something.
That's exactly right.
In your actions.
That's exactly right.
And I just want to say your words do too.
Thank you. If I can tell a story super quick, I promise, to exactly that point. Ken Chenault gave me this amazing piece of advice kind of, midway through our relationship. I was probably in my 40s at the time or something like that. And it was extraordinarily helpful. And I was so moved by how helpful it was. I just said to him, I'm so grateful for this. And he said, Scott, you should know that I met your grandfather decades ago. And he told me that he had this grandson that he thought was going to, he was going to grow up and be a business person. And he said, if you ever have a chance to be helpful for him, if you ever come across paths with him and you have a chance to be helpful, I would just ask you if you could please, give him a hand. And my grandfather had passed decades beforehand, and here was this full circle moment that Ken Chenault was able to step up and give me this great piece of advice because my ancestor, right, had this vision decades before to ask for it.
Yeah, that's social currency on steroids.
Yeah.
Your name means something. And continue to do the good work, Scott. I think at the end of the day, we need more thoughtful leaders and less braggadocious and intimidating leaders.
Right.
You seem like a very inclusive person that wants the best for culture, and I salute you, King.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you, brother.
stopping by.
Thank you, brother.
All right, love.